Margaret Mead's journeys to the Pacific Islands like Samoa and New Guinea allowed her to learn about the specific cultural aspects of each different civilization and propose controversial challenges to ideas such as gender role and the societal impact of culture on the human psychology. Following harsh criticism, her work eventually allowed for the recognition of the idea that the human experience has more of a basis for behavior than the commonly shared traits between the human race. Margaret Mead was one of the most important and influential American anthropologists of the 20th century. Her work was primarily based in exploring the Pacific Islands, where she worked with cultures of illiterate civilizations. In her study, she focused mostly on women and children to use as comparison with American society. Once finished in the Pacific, Mead wrote 23 books about her work, which contained more observations than statistics, and many were best-selling novels. In the public eye, Mead was regarded as a celebrity for speaking about many controversial issues. She was also widely recognized for her strong opinions and personal experience with her own sexuality. Mead was bisexual and had male and female partners at different points in her life. After returning from her studies, Mead worked as curator for all sections of the American Museum of Natural History. One of her biggest achievements came when she was elected for presidency of the American Association for the Advancement of Science at 72. She was granted the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously by President Jimmy Carter for all of her contributions for society and anthropology. The three main contributors to Mead's interest in the Pacific Islands were her professor Franz Boas, her friend Ruth Benedict, and her PhD study. Boas instructed all of his students to go out and learn about early cultures before they disappeared due to contact with the modern world. He wanted Mead to study adolescence due to her background in psychology. Ruth Benedict convinced Mead to go into anthropology so that they could work together to popularize their work. Mead's PhD intensely studied the culture and psychology behind Polynesian civilizations and would be the reason most of her work was focused in the Pacific region. In the Tau culture of Samoa, Mead witnessed the more free nature of adolescent girls. Showing a high respect to their elders, these girls were still very dignified in cultural ceremonies. These differences made child rearing easier and less stressful on the children of Samoa. In New Guinea, Mead found from 3 different cultures she studied that in the Aitmal tribe, a strong bond between children and elders is formed, and children are taught to pressure others to get what they want. Based on drawings that she studied, there was no relationship in design elements. In the Sepik region, gender roles were different in separate societies and from the U.S. with different forms of matriarch societies. This created a systematic relationship between culture and personality. In the Pear tribe, Mead studied the thought process of children by using drawings. These showed realistic drawings of everyday life with differences between the genders. Mead noted that the children showed physical skills for survival, but elders didn't place much strain on children. On the island of Bali, in Indonesia, Mead saw that there was an emotional fear in children of outsiders and that the older children took responsibility of younger ones. As part of her research, Mead took lots of video and pictures in set intervals for visual observation on shadow puppets, which were a large part of Balinese culture and representative of the religious importance.
What was revolutionary about the way she did her work is that she focused on women and children.
From Samoa, Mead reported that adolescence was not a stressful time due to the cultural differences between Samoa and America. Even with living in structurally similar societies, girls still had less pressure on them compared to America. From New Guinea, Mead concluded that what is considered childlike in thought varies according to the emphasis of the culture. For example, the supernatural things considered childish in America was a main part of culture for Manus, so it wasn't as prevalent in their imaginations. Mead also sampled drawings done by children, and she noticed variation in drawings based on age and sex. The children were also inclined to describe in relation to the world around them, which led her to challenge that animism is a universal stage in children. The sex and temperament that Mead based her overall work on challenged her to discover what extent temperamental differences between the sexes were culturally determined rather than innate. Women and children felt American culture was overstated and funny, yet she found that certain aspects of culture were more hidden from women in the places that she studied. Mead also developed the rope kinship theory, which concluded that alternating gender and family generations leads to anomalous culture. In her studies of matriarchal societies, Mead observed different physical, emotional, and caring characteristics between both male and female. This meant that although the women were always in power, men still had roles to fulfill in society that depended on the women. When studying these cultures, Mead marked the importance of her femininity as the connection between the anthropological approach used to study a culture and the characteristics of the culture study, in order to consider the perspective of the interpreter of the work. While observing in Bali, Mead was able to make different conclusions about the personalities of the primitive culture. She noted a fear in the culture of outsiders as well as teaching styles that emphasize passivity and awareness. These differences in cultures led to different types of artwork with different symbolisms than the one she had previously collected from New Guinea. In order to share her knowledge with the world, Margaret wrote many books about her findings that were directed at the general public.
She opened the way for others to follow in the South Pacific and Melanesia. But she brought their cultural heritage to public attention, and it invited a whole lot more interest.
As very controversial and shocking to the world, Mead's work was not immediately accepted by the public and anthropologic community. Although, after consistent observations and data as well as different anthropologists eventually reaching the same conclusions, Mead's work began to become accepted. However, there is the case of Derek Freeman, a New Zealander anthropologist who consistently challenged Mead's work by claiming that she had been tricked in her research. Although he believed that Mead fabricated research to prove her theories, many anthropologists still stand behind Mead and her work. Margaret Mead's work pointed out problems with American culture in relation to adolescence and child rearing. It also made major steps in the feminist movement, with her discovery that masculinity and femininity are results of culture, which broke many social taboos at the time. Yet it was still able to transform the public opinion of sexuality. However, she wasn't able to study societies with complex family structures, and many argue that her work encouraged promiscuity. Unfortunately, Mead gave up parts of scientific anthropology to pursue a wider public stature. Margaret Mead was able to make surprising new discoveries and connections to the world of anthropology through the many trips to varying Pacific islands. By taking in the different Polynesian culture and using her observations to make comparisons between the primitive society she studied and the complex culture she faced back in the United States. Her contributions to the world were revolutionary in the debate of nature versus nurture and went on to support cultural impact as the cause of behavior. Mead's work caused a transition in society's standards of sexuality, as well as pushing the feminist movement forward by determining that the gender roles in American culture were not based off of biology and are a result of that culture. By widely spreading her work with the general public, Mead became the link between the findings of science and anthropology and the problems faced in the society of America.
I think that it wasn't enough for her to simply advance our understanding of why people do what they do in different cultural settings, but it was to apply this understanding to the solution of some of the world's most pressing problems.